I didn't come for the burgers. I came hoping, just maybe, this year would be different. But all it took was one sentence from my dad, and I knew I was never really welcome here. The smell of grilled meat always used to mean summer, family, laughter, togetherness. Now it smelled like judgment, heat, and humiliation. I was barely out of my car when I saw them, my parents. Dad in his classic polo and smug stance by the grill, Mum standing with a plate in one hand and critique in her eyes. Same backyard, same crowd, same questions every single year. I adjusted my blouse, smoothed my pants, and tried to smile. I shouldn't have bothered. "Oh," my mother said, raising an eyebrow. "That's what you chose to wear?" She didn't wait for an answer. "You know, it wouldn't kill you to try a dress once in a while. Something flattering." Right on cue, my cousin's fiancé turned to stare. I gave a polite smile and kept walking, pretending the words didn't land. But they always did. Like stones, not feathers. I was 33, single, successful, and still, somehow, an embarrassment in my parents' eyes. Every family has their traditions. Ours was pretending to care about each other long enough to make it through the BBQ, and then quietly picking each other apart like vultures. "Still doing that writing thing?" my uncle asked, pouring himself a drink. "Still doing that breathing thing?" I wanted to snap, but I didn't. Aunt Cheryl leaned in. "You know, your sister's baby is due in 2 months. Second one. You must feel so behind." Behind what? A race I never entered? I stood near the drink table, nursing a watered-down lemonade and avoiding the circle of folding chairs around the grill. I wasn't hungry. I was trying not to shake. Then he said it. "Why are you even here?" My dad, wiping grease from his fingers like he'd just tossed out trash. "Seriously, Camille," he continued, chuckling to his buddy, "you show up every year with nothing to show. No husband, no child, not even a +1, just wasting space." I froze. Laughter echoed around me, low, uncomfortable. No one defended me. No one even looked me in the eye. Mom didn't flinch. She didn't tell him to stop. She just picked up a crumb on the table and brushed it off, like I was a speck of dust ruining her display. "Maybe you should leave," she said. Not cruelly, not loudly, just cold. As if she were asking someone to take off their shoes before stepping inside. That was the moment. The one that splits your timeline in two. Before and after. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just nodded, turned, and walked toward my car. Behind me, someone muttered harsh, and another voice said, "She knows how they are." But no one stopped me. Not a single one of them cared enough to say, "Stay." Back in the car, the tears came, quiet, restrained. I didn't sob. I'd learned not to give them that much of me. But they came anyway. Because it wasn't just about this BBQ. It was about every time I sat at the kids' table well into my 20s, every time my accomplishments were ignored while my sister got applause for baking banana bread, every time I asked, "Do you want to hear what I've been working on?" And they changed the subject. They'd made it clear I wasn't the daughter they wanted, just the one they tolerated. And today, they decided they were done tolerating me too. The worst part? I had tried. Year after year, birthday cards, housewarming gifts, even free edits for my dad's retirement speech. I just wanted a seat at the table, a smile that wasn't laced with comparison. But some families don't push you away once. They do it slowly, over decades, with side comments, with sighs, with silence. Today, they just happened to do it loud enough for the whole backyard to hear. I drove home in silence, no music, just the sound of my thoughts stacking up like bricks. What was I still trying to prove to these people? And why did it hurt so badly, knowing I'd never be enough for them? This isn't the kind of revenge story that starts with fury. Mine started with grief. with disappointment, with finally letting go of the hope that someday they'd see me and say, "We're proud." They weren't. They never would be. So I stopped trying. And that was when the real story began. The silence in my apartment felt louder than the crowd I'd just walked away from. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my purse on the couch, and stood there, still holding the lemonade cup from the BBQ, still trembling a little, still hoping, somewhere deep down, that someone from the party would call. They didn't. No missed calls, no texts, not even a guilt-ridden "sorry about earlier." I sat down slowly, like my body was heavier than usual, like my skin had soaked up every cruel word and didn't know how to let it go. My fingers curled around the plastic cup until it cracked. I hadn't even realized I was holding my breath. It was like the little girl in me still expected someone, anyone, to run after her and say, "Don't go, we didn't mean it, you matter to us." But no one ever did, not when I was 8, not when I was 18, and certainly not now at 33. I remember when I first learned how to disappear without anyone noticing. I was 9, I think. My sister had just been born, my mum was exhausted, my dad was stressed, and I was quiet, too quiet. One day I tripped on the front steps and scraped my entire shin. I came in crying, blood dripping onto the tile. My mum looked up from nursing my sister and said, "Could you not right now? I don't have time for drama." I remember going to the bathroom, cleaning it up myself and not saying a word about it after, just swallowing it. That was the day I stopped asking to be seen. And honestly, it never felt like anyone noticed the difference. I curled up on the couch and stared at the ceiling. The fan spun lazily. The air was thick. My phone screen lit up, then dimmed. A news alert. Nothing important. Definitely not the kind of alert I had hoped for. They weren't going to call. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. I opened my old notebook, the one I used to journal in before I turned all my pain into publishable content. I flipped back to a page I hadn't touched in years. A list. Things I wish my parents had said. It started with, "You were never a burden." "We're proud of you." "We're sorry." I looked at the list and laughed, sharp and bitter. It was still blank after those 3. You ever try so hard to be chosen by people who've already decided you're not enough? Like no matter what you do, you're always one step behind the finish line, they keep moving. If you've been through that, if you've ever stood there waiting for someone who never looked back, tell me I'm not the only one. Seriously, drop it in the comments. I want to know. I want to know if your silence has ever felt louder than any goodbye. I wasn't just upset, I was grieving the fantasy that my family would ever treat me like I mattered. I had a house, a career, a name. But inside, I still felt like that girl who got the garage to sleep in because my brother needed the room. Oh yeah, that actually happened. When I was 15, my little brother was studying for his SATs. My parents told me to move into the garage so he could concentrate better. They didn't even clean it out first, just handed me a blanket and said, "Make it work." The garage smelled like oil and old newspapers. There were spiders, no insulation, but I did it. I didn't argue, I didn't cry, because I had learned. Making a scene only got you labelled too emotional. Staying quiet got you forgotten. And somehow, that hurt less. Now, sitting in my fully paid-off apartment, surrounded by signed first editions of my own books, I realised something awful. I had everything I thought would finally make them love me, and they still didn't. That's when the tears really came. Not sobbing, just steady, exhausted. Like the sadness had been waiting years for permission to show its face. I wasn't crying because they hurt me tonight. I was crying because they'd been hurting me for a very long time, and I had run out of excuses to pretend it wasn't real. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From one person who always noticed. "Elias, I hate seeing you hurt. Want to fly out this weekend? Jet's already fueled. I stared at the screen. He didn't say, "Don't be sad." He didn't say, "Ignore them." He just saw me and offered a way out. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Me. Yes. I didn't pack much. Just a few clean shirts, my laptop, a half-finished notebook, and the kind of emotional exhaustion you can't fold into a suitcase. Elias had said his jet was already prepped. I didn't ask where we were going. I just texted yes, and 15 minutes later, his assistant sent the pickup time. That next morning, I stood outside my apartment at 6 a.m, watching a sleek black car pull up to the curb. The driver stepped out, opened the door, and said, "Miss Brooks, Mr. Marston is expecting you." I nodded and got in. No makeup, no earrings, just clean skin and a quiet ache that hadn't faded yet. The jet smelled like leather and citrus, clean, uncomplicated. Elias was already on board, sitting with a glass of coffee and his ever-present tablet. He stood when he saw me, always stands, like I matter, like I'm not an afterthought. "Hey," he said gently, wrapping me in a hug that didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't cry, not yet, but my shoulders dropped a little, like they finally had permission to stop holding it all up. We landed in Napa around 9 a.m. His place wasn't just a house, it was a whole valley tucked behind gated roads and winding trees. Olive branches lined the path like a painting. The estate rose from the centre like it belonged there. Everything smelled like fresh soil and warm wind. "Welcome to stillness," he said, smiling as we walked through the vineyard toward the house. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I breathed all the way in. The days passed slowly, not boring slow, healing slow. I slept late. I ate food I didn't have to justify. I drank tea on the porch with the sun on my skin. And I wrote, not out of obligation, not because I had a deadline breathing down my neck, but because I wanted to. I sat in a study lined with books, sunlight pouring in through high windows, and finished the manuscript I'd been working on for 6 months. I hit send to my publisher, then stared at the screen. It was done, and it was good. 10 minutes later, my agent replied, "It's beautiful. This is your best one yet." I didn't even tell my parents I was writing a 4th book. They never asked. That night, Elias made dinner, not fancy, grilled fish, roasted vegetables, a bottle of red from his vineyard. We ate on the patio, listening to the breeze rustle through the vines. No pressure to talk, no awkward silences, just quiet company. Halfway through the meal, he looked up and said, "Why do you still hide me from them?" I blinked. "What?" He repeated it, softer this time. "Your family. Why do they still not know about me?" I put down my fork and stared out across the hills. I think part of me still wanted to earn their pride before I showed them anything good. Like if I brought you up too soon, they'd say I didn't deserve you. Or worse, assume you were temporary. He nodded. "And the other part?" I sighed. "Maybe I thought they didn't deserve to know about you." He smiled, not smug, but knowing. "Camille, you keep hiding pieces of your life to protect people who don't even want to see the whole picture." That one hit hard. Later, as we watched the sun drop behind the hills, he leaned toward me and said, "What if we gave them a little show?" I laughed, bitter. "You want to meet my family? After what they said?" "Not to impress them," he said, "to remind you who you are. To remind them what they lost." I shook my head. "You know how these people are." "Exactly why I want to go," he said. "Not for them, for you. Let them see you, not through their lens, but through your truth. And let me stand next to you when you do." I didn't answer right away, because deep down, That girl who was told to sleep in the garage still whispered, "Don't make them mad. Don't stand too tall. You'll just get shoved down again." But that whisper was getting quieter. That night I opened my email again. Among the notifications was one I hadn't expected. My book, the one I submitted 2 days ago, was already trending on pre-orders. A message from my publisher sat at the top. "Big studios are asking about the film rights. Are you open to negotiating?" I stared at it. Not because I was shocked, but because for the first time I didn't need this moment to prove anything. I wasn't writing for them anymore. I closed the laptop, walked to the patio, and found Elias sipping wine with his feet up on the railing. "I'm in," I said. He smiled. "To the plan?" "To all of it." And just like that, we began planning the most unapologetic, no tears, no screaming, ice-cold truth bomb I'd ever drop. Not to fight, not to get even, just to show them the daughter they tried so hard to erase still exists. And she's doing just fine. It started with a message I hadn't expected, and definitely hadn't wanted. Group chat. "Family BBQ this Sunday, hosted at our place this time." Then a follow-up text from my sister, directly to me. "Everyone's welcome, Camille. Yes, even you, if you're done figuring life out." There it was, that fake nice sugar-coated stab she was always so good at. I stared at my phone. A dozen replies were already flooding in. "So excited." "We'll bring wine. Can't wait to see the baby bump." The same people who watched me get humiliated last time, the same ones who stayed quiet. And now? They were lining up for another round, this time at my sister's house, as if she were the heir to some twisted throne of family approval. I showed Elias the message. He read it, smirked. "Well, that's polite." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm serious," he said. "Most people don't send hate mail with emojis. That takes talent." I wanted to laugh. I almost did, but there was a knot in my chest, one I couldn't quite untie. "She knows what happened," I said. "She was there. She heard everything." Elias nodded slowly. "She did. And she said nothing." We sat on the deck for a while. The wind moved through the vines like it had somewhere better to be. I watched the sun paint the edges of the hills gold and tried to decide how much of myself I was willing to bring back into that house. "Do you want to go?" Elias asked gently. "We don't have to." I didn't answer right away, because no, I didn't want to go. But something deeper than want was stirring inside me. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It wasn't about revenge or one-upping my sister or even hearing my dad say sorry. It was about me, about choosing not to stay hidden anymore, about showing up on my terms for once. So I nodded. "Yeah, let's go." Elias reached for my hand. "Then let's make sure you're seen the way you deserve." We spent the next few days planning, not outfits or speeches, but energy. I didn't want to arrive flashy. I wanted to arrive still, unapologetic, clear. Elias handled the logistics, his car, his schedule, a discreet conversation with a real estate attorney. I didn't even ask questions. He handed me one document with a quiet smile. "They'll know who owns the house by the time dessert is served." I looked down. It was a property transfer, the house my sister and her husband were hosting the party in. 3 months ago, it had quietly gone into pre-foreclosure. Through a holding company, Elias bought it. In my name. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "I'm not here to save you," he said. "I'm here to stand beside you while you save yourself." Sunday came fast. I wore a white jumpsuit, clean lines, nothing extra. No jewellery, but a simple gold watch, hair back, chin up. We pulled up in a quiet black sedan. No limo, no entourage, just a hum of quiet power. My sister opened the door. Her smile twitched when she saw Elias behind me. "Oh, hi, you brought someone." I smiled softly. Fiancé, actually. She blinked. Behind her, the same crowd was already sipping from plastic cups. Dad was by the grill again. Mom was arranging deviled eggs on a tray like she was hosting a royal banquet. We stepped inside. People turned. Faces shifted. A few murmurs. One glass froze halfway to someone's mouth. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Not yet. Elias handed a bottle of wine to my dad. "This is from our vineyard," he said smoothly. "Figured it'd suit the occasion." My dad took it without making eye contact. "Thanks." Then he mumbled, loud enough for people nearby to hear, "At least she brought someone who looks like he pays his taxes." That old familiar burn crept up my spine, but this time it didn't hit the same. I glanced at Elias, who raised his glass and whispered, "To being underestimated." And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not to please anyone, but because I wasn't the same woman they threw out. There's a special kind of silence that falls when people realize they were wrong. Not because you told them, but because you showed up different. And that silence was exactly what greeted me as I stepped onto the patio, hand in hand with Elias, my fiancé, and the man they'd never bothered to ask about. The same old folding chairs, the same loud laughter from people trying too hard, the same plastic tablecloth flapping in the breeze. But this time, the table didn't own me. This time, I came with nothing to prove. And yet... The air shifted the second we walked in. My aunt paused mid-sip. My cousin raised an eyebrow. Someone whispered my name like it tasted foreign in their mouth. Elias walked beside me like he always did, calm, grounded, no theatrics. No hand-squeezing reassurance, just presence, the kind that speaks louder than any apology you never got. My mother approached with a smile so thin it could cut glass. "Oh, Camille, you made it." She leaned in for a side kiss that didn't touch my cheek. "You brought a friend?" she asked, glancing at Elias like he was a rented prop. I smiled. "My fiancé, actually." Her jaw twitched. "Oh, not congratulations, not when's the date, just, oh, classic." We moved to the drinks table. I poured a glass of lemonade, same as last year, same plastic cup, different energy. My dad wandered over, already 2 beers in. He looked at Elias, then back at me. "Well, at least this guy looks like he knows how to shake a hand." Elias extended his, all grace and charm. "Good to meet you, sir. I've heard so much about you." My dad didn't shake it. He just grunted and wandered off, muttering, "Took her long enough." I stood at the edge of the yard and watched the people who used to talk over me, who used to act like I was invisible unless they needed someone to take photos or watch the kids or serve dessert. And now they watched me, not with warmth, not yet, but with something new, something like confusion. Dinner was called. Same long wooden table from when I was a kid. The one where I was always seated last, sometimes not at all. The one I used to serve plates around before I could sit. But this time, I sat at the centre, Elias next to me, uninvited but unmovable. My sister hovered near the grill, fake laughing as she refilled wine glasses. She kept looking over at me, that tight smile starting to crack. Her husband tried to act casual, but I noticed the slight twitch in his brow when Elias leaned over and whispered something about vineyard acreage. We weren't playing rich, we were just being exactly who we are, which, for them, was the loudest statement possible. Then came the toast. My dad stood up, beer in hand, already swaying slightly. All right, he said. "Let's raise a glass to family, to success, to those who finally figured it out. Eventually." Laughter. Thin. Forced. I didn't smile. Then he added with a lazy grin, "And to our daughter. She might be late to life, but hey, at least she brought someone who looks like he pays his taxes." More laughter. Elias didn't react. Neither did I, but I stood, raised my glass, and said calmly, "If we're toasting, then let's do it right." Silence fell. You could hear the wind in the leaves. I looked directly at my father. To the girl who used to sleep in the garage because her brother needed quiet. To the daughter who was told she wasn't useful unless she brought a man. To the woman who was laughed at in this exact backyard until she built a name big enough you had to Google it just to feel included. Someone dropped a fork. I turned to the table. And to my fiancé, the one no one ever asked about because you all assumed I'd never be worth someone like him. Elias stood too, calm as ever. He pulled a small folder from inside his jacket and placed it gently on the table. "And to this house," he said, "which went into pre-foreclosure 3 months ago, which was quietly purchased under a holding company that belongs to Camille." Gasps, actual, audible gasps. My sister's eyes darted toward her husband. My mother's mouth opened but said nothing. "A notice has already been filed," I said quietly. "You have 30 days to vacate, but I figured, out of courtesy, I'd let you host one last BBQ. You're welcome." My dad stood red-faced. "You're joking." I shook my head. "You made me sleep in a garage. You mocked me in front of every relative. You told me I was wasting space." I stepped closer. "You don't get to be shocked that I stopped playing small." My sister slammed her glass down. "This was supposed to be my day." I didn't flinch. "No. This was supposed to be the day you looked at me and saw the same failure you've always assumed I was. But newsflash, failures don't buy the house out from under you." Everyone stared. No one spoke. And I didn't need them to. I placed the final wine bottle on the table. From Elias's vineyard, the label read, "Marston and Brooks." As we turned to leave, I didn't look back, but I could feel the weight of every single eye, not with pity, not even anger, but something far more valuable, recognition, and the kind that doesn't need permission. The thing about moments like that, where the whole room realizes they've misread you for years, is that they stay quiet. Not out of respect, but because they don't know what comes next. But for me, there was nothing left to say. I'd already said it all without raising my voice. Elias and I walked slowly toward the front gate. Behind us, no one moved, not even my mother. The same woman who once told me I'd never make anything of myself unless I married well. The same woman who smirked when I got rejected from my first publisher. She didn't say a word now, not a protest. Not a question, just silence. When we reached the car, Elias opened the door for me like he always did. Not performative, just natural, like that's what you do for someone you respect. As I slid into the seat, I looked back, just once. The backyard looked smaller. That long wooden table suddenly didn't feel like a place I ever wanted to sit again. And you know what? That felt like closure. The ride was quiet, but not the heavy kind. Not sad. It was peaceful, weightless. I leaned my head back and thought about how many years I spent waiting for a seat at a table I didn't even like, waiting for an invitation, for an apology, for proof I mattered. Turns out all I needed was to stop waiting. Back at the house, I changed into something soft. Old sweats, my favourite hoodie, no makeup. I made tea. Curled up by the fireplace, Elias was across the room reading. His presence always felt like quiet gravity, no pressure, just steady. And somewhere between sips of tea and the ticking of the clock, I realised, they'll remember today. But I won't relive it. I didn't check the group chat. I didn't open any messages. I didn't need to know if someone didn't mean it or was caught off guard. Because here's the truth. No one likes to say out loud. Sometimes people hurt you, not because they don't realize it, but because they're used to getting away with it. And when you stop letting them, that's when the story changes. I pulled out my old notebook again, same one I'd once filled with the list of things I wished my parents would say. And this time I wrote something new. You don't need their apology to move on. You don't need their pride to have worth. You don't need their table to eat well. I closed the notebook. That chapter was done. The next morning, Elias brewed the coffee like he always did. He handed me a mug, kissed my forehead, and said, "So, what's next?" I smiled. "Whatever I want." We took a walk through the vineyard. The air smelled like new beginnings. Later that week, I got a message from my publisher. My book had just hit #1. Movie rights confirmed. I screenshotted it. But I didn't send it to my family. Not out of spite, out of peace. I didn't need them to know anymore. I knew. The following month, I got confirmation the family had moved out of the house. No resistance, no drama, just gone. It was mine now. We turned it into something better. Not a home, not a trophy, but a space for other people who never had a place. We partnered with a non-profit, turned the house into a creative retreat for young writers, especially those who'd never been told their voices mattered. It filled up within weeks, and every time I walked past the kitchen, the same one where my mother once told me I was just dramatic, I smiled, because now that space is full of voices, full of dreams, and none of them need permission. You know, I used to think stories like mine were tragic, but they're not. They're clarifying. When the people who are supposed to love you choose not to, you learn the difference between love and loyalty to pain. And once you learn that, you never go back. So, to anyone out there who's been told you were too much or not enough, or that you'll never be worth showing off, let me say it clearly. You don't have to get louder. You just have to stop shrinking. They'll notice. And if they don't, who cares? You're not here to make them comfortable. Have you ever walked away from a family, a friendship, or a group that never saw your value until it was too late? I want to hear your stories. Tell me in the comments, when was your "I'm done" moment? Because if you've had one, you're not alone. And if you haven't yet, maybe this is it.